Here to discuss that matter and much more to my immediate right is Harun Dubi. As I told you earlier, he is a well-known human rights advocate. In the middle is our resident political analyst, Edward Kisiangani, and across from me is Mkurueni MP Kabando Wakabando. We welcome your views on the program. As always, 22422, that is our SMS line. Of course, if you're on social media, please use the hashtag #OpinionCourt. You can reach out to us on @CitizenTV Kenya and @CitizenTV News, and the Facebook pages that go by those respective names. I want to start with you, Harun, because I know you have vehemently opposed what Kenya has been doing. I mean, way back from New York on the sidelines of the summit there. What do you think of Kenya's latest push now at the African Union? We've heard it hasn't garnered too much support right now. We're the only signatories to ratifying the Malaba Protocol. Your thoughts?
Anne, thank you very much. I would like first to say that some words sound very big when spoken, but when unpacked, they are hollow and nothing. When you talk about African solutions for African problems, homegrown solutions for our problems, when you unpack those two words or adjectives, they mean completely nothing. We must remember that the International Criminal Court was established by countries of the world to deal with questions of impunity at the highest level. We have not asked the question, or Kenya and African governments and the AU have not explained what is the mischief that we are dealing with in terms of attempting to start a court other than the ICC, and they are not explaining to citizens of their countries, including us in Kenya, that that court is not going to be a replacement or a branch of the ICC. The other important thing for people to know is that the Malabo Protocol actually sought to amend the protocol that established the African Commission and the African Court of Human Rights to include in it immunity for sitting heads of state and government and other senior officers at high levels of government from being tried while they are in office. Really, that is the very point. That was the very mischief for establishing the ICC. So what Africa is trying to do, or Kenya especially, and I'm disappointed that my country can actually seek to even contradict our own constitution without involving us in a formal discussion as Kenyans about this issue, is that it seeks to promote an agenda, an idea that is contradictory to our own constitution, but also is meaningless because the current trial of William Ruto and even the case of the president before cannot be removed or stopped on account of establishing a new court. The other important question that we haven't discussed is who is going to fund this. If the tribunal in Arusha dealing with the issues of Rwanda was being funded by the UN and other countries out there, who is going to fund this bigger court for Africa, even when we know that member states of the AU are in default of their annual subscriptions to the AU itself, which is more.
Right. I'll come back to the technicalities of the actual operations of the court, but thank you for pointing that out. Kabando, let me come to you. What he has said is that African solutions to African problems is pure hot air. Would you agree?
Except in politics, it's very easy to agree that Africans have set paces. They have been pioneers in many other disciplines, in academia, in arts, in leadership, that we have set a pace, and we have been trailblazers in many other areas. And now to isolate politics or political initiatives, nearly a century after the struggle for independence of African nations, and over 50 years after our own nation got independence after a major struggle, and they say that we cannot initiate processes that can actually recognize that we can have solutions to our own problems is a contradiction. Because if you go to Europe or America, if you go to private enterprises, if you go to academia, or even when you're watching the European soccer, you see Africans in their physical, in their intellectual, in their spiritual initiative and capabilities that have caused the world to stand and watch and say, here comes a continent that has solutions. Even in terms of resources, the rest of the world is struggling for Africa. Not just material resources, also intellectual resources. And therefore, just like Kwame Nkrumah and the pioneer Pan-Africanists, who included Jomo Kenyatta, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, sought to found OAU so that we could conglomerate or bring together African nations as leaders in order to build consensus on incumbent issues that could bring solutions. So should we now. And therefore, the effort that's being done by African Union is not completely without logic. I personally, and many more people, particularly those who have been democratically elected, and therefore they sit in the national leadership institutions, that the National Parliament of Kenya, are convinced by majority that we need to empower AU and its affiliate institutions in order to put more strength on Africa solutions to Africa. And by the way, those that are arguing against this have themselves immunized themselves and their own citizens against the same ICC that they want Africa to be eternally subject to.
Right, like the United States.
Absolutely.
We'll come to that. Prof, let me come to you with this. You know, the thinking behind, at least popular opinion, is that what is happening right now in the African Union may be an attempt of cronies to protect cronies and nothing more than that. Having said that, do you believe that there is evidence from other fora that African leaders are actually able and willing to hold each other to account?
I think, Anne, it is a very, very pathetic situation that we are facing, because it is a situation where top leadership in this country is using taxpayers' money to go abroad to do something that is really not useful to this country. And for the Minister for Foreign Affairs, the Cabinet Secretary, I think those who describe her as the Cabinet Secretary for ICC affairs probably are right. We have a bigger job to do in this country than what they are doing. I want to come quickly to your point. I think, first of all, this process, look, especially the Kenyan case, was a personal problem. The personal problem was ethnicized. Now it has been Africanized. It is a very bad, because it has been Africanized. Some of the people who are talking loudly, including those who have traveled to Addis Ababa, would have moved goalposts if certain people were not involved. So the language you will see in future in 2023 will probably be different. They will want somebody to be prosecuted. That is the folly of our politics. But if you look at the record of Africa since independence, it's not a very encouraging record. First of all, ICC did not invite itself here. And people keep losing this thing, and I don't know why they lose it. When Rwanda had a genocide, the world was condemned, including the Western world. Why did you watch? And it's because of Rwanda, 1 million skulls, those who have traveled to Rwanda, is what caused the establishment of ICC. Now, if you kill people in Kenya, you kill people in Tanzania, and you also kill people in Czechoslovakia, there is nothing like African killing. You have killed human beings. So there is totally no record. We have had dictators. We have people, including where the Malabo Protocol was done in Equatorial Guinea. That is not an example of a leader that you would want to inform your nursery school child that this is the kind of leader you should imitate.
And yet saying that, Professor, yes, there's the contrary argument that countries such as the United States have committed, in some people's views, war crimes, and yet we do not see any prosecution of former U.S. presidents.
Yes, that is correct. And it doesn't begin to justify another mistake. First of all, there have been efforts to say that, you know, the United States does not hold itself accountable. You remember that when the ICC was established, countries were given a chance to ratify and join the treaty. Nobody was forced. But because of the pressure that Kenya has had, Africa had had with regard to places like Rwanda, they willingly signed. So we had a chance in 2002, 2003 to reject it. We didn't reject it. So once we joined, we hoped that it would favor us. When things became bad, we said we don't want it. I think the most important thing, Anne, is this. it's not going to be an easy matter to withdraw from the ICC. But we must remember one thing, that locally we have Section 2, Article 5 of the Constitution, whose main heading is the supremacy of the Constitution. And the matter of the supremacy of the Constitution is referendum. If you have read the Constitution very well, then that article is read against Article 143 on exemption, and Article 145 also saying what should be done if the president has committed crimes under international law. So the process that my friend Ndubi is talking about requires that we come back to the people of Kenya to say, to ask them to say, do they want this ICC problem to be terminated? The other day, Mheshimiwa Kabando is here. One of his colleagues in Parliament was trying to move a motion where he thought that Parliament could still start a process and pass an act of Parliament that would remove us from the ICC. Yes, it's not going to be busy, because, very, very easy. So, to cut the long story short, Anne, the point is that we're wasting time in Addis Ababa. Africans who are going there to say we must pull out of the ICC, some of them have already committed crimes, some hope to commit crimes tomorrow, and the others are going to commit crimes 5 years later. So they are trying to establish a ground where, when they commit crimes, they have an ineffectual African court which does not work and which dances to the whims of political leaders. And in the end, Anne, there will be no justice. Actually, this is Addis Ababa. And I want just to make this final comment on this.
Make it brief so that we can bring the rest.
Addis Ababa is a very bad place for Africa. First, we need,
why?
Yes, it is a place which has seen the highest level of dictatorship in this continent. And it is the place which also promotes impunity in Africa.
And so this is symbolic.
As much as we want to discredit, let us not lose our pride as Africans. The worst thing that can happen to any citizen is to lose pride in oneself, in your own community, particularly in the community of nations that are Africans. Because we know where you're coming from. Just the other day, the rest of the world, because of economic interest, criminalized, stigmatized, and bastardized Nelson Madiba Mandela. And the people who are very loud today, saying that Africans cannot have solutions to their problems, were at the forefront of supporting the retention of racism, apartheid in South Africa. I think that's a very beautiful lesson that no Africa should get lost, because when Mandela came out in 1990, February 1990, and when he died, the whole world was crowding to celebrate this African icon. Yet, to that who is very loud, Mandela was
a
terrorist, just like Jomo Kenyatta was a terrorist and a leader unto darkness.
I want to correct something.
Before you do, Prof,
can I finish?
I'm itching to respond to you, my brother Kabando, because I think it's not correct to revise history to be revisionist.
Yes.
It is important to remember this. Pride is not the same thing as esteem, self-esteem. We as Africans must not lose our self-esteem. What the state, the governments are doing, especially the government of Kenya and those, the Ugandan government and others, are asking us to lose our self-esteem and look at ourselves in the negative sense racially, to say we can't compete with the rest of the world at the same level. We can't participate with the rest of the world at the same level. So let us have our own thing as Africans here and keep our borders as Africans closed, so that we work for ourselves within ourselves. Two, when we are seeking to establish a court, indeed, I like what you criticized us, talking about that we are saying we don't have African solutions for African problems. But let us be practical about our own problem in Kenya. Nobody has said that there was no violence in this country. Nobody has said that people did not die. Nobody has said that crimes were committed in this country. But what solution have we provided? How many trials can you say that there have been trials to bring forth accountability? What have we done to ensure that impunity is not advanced? Yet, and I'm not commenting about the case ongoing about the security sector laws, yet we are enacting laws that are seemingly entrenching impunity. So this thing about African solutions, nobody has proposed practically that these are the solutions we are proposing as Africans for dealing with the problems, rather than saying we want to have a court because we dislike ICC. You cannot start enacting systems and creating systems for yourself because of the dislike or hatred of others. You build systems because of what you aspire to do. Now, this negativity that we don't like ICC, we don't like the rest of the world, we don't like the West, we are looking east because the West is bad, that cannot be the basis of building a continent or a...
Let me come to you, Kabando, with a question, and you may add that in your response. What would you make... You've talked very much about, you know, Africans be at the forefront of various things. But what would you then make of the push to sort of go backwards when the rest of the world is agreeing that even sitting heads of state should be prosecuted? We have not just the Mithika Linturi proposed amendment, but also what is happening with the proposed ratifying of this Malaba protocol, to have the same sitting heads of state immune from prosecution when the rest of the world is saying no matter how high in office you are, you should stand trial if you've done something.
Three things. One is to disagree with Harun that Parliament is enacting impunity unless you want to discuss the case that is ongoing in court. That is subject to court decision. Otherwise, the 11th Parliament has done sufficiently well in creating institutions that will enable the new dispensation, the new constitution to work. And that is known, you can enumerate, and it is evident.
All right,
number two, there isn't any argument that Africans are fighting any other continent. Africans are only saying through their legitimately elected, democratically elected people, because you have to come and submit to this fact that in Kenya, for instance, you cannot dismiss the fact that we have a democratically elected national executive, national parliament, county assemblies, governors, and so on and so forth. And therefore, what we need to appreciate is that we are at a stage where Africans are saying we can anchor into law through consensus, through our elected officials, an institution that will seek solutions to African problems. I think thirdly, Anne, is to ask, are we saying that this is as bad before even we have formed it?
But
why are we rushing? Why are we rushing to criticize? Before you ask a question, Professor, why are we rushing to criticize an institution
that has not yet been
that is not formed unless you are saying we have fear of the unknown?
It's because you plan to commit crimes in 2022 and 2023. Let me just respond quickly. You know,
can you prove that?
You know, let me just say this quickly. You know, you are talking about Mandela. I want to make that correction very quickly. We are not excusing the West for what it did against Africa. And you have heard, even the British government has been trying to compensate the people it had during the Mau Mau. But the ICC case came after 98, when it became clear that the international community does not have a way of sorting out problems. So, and they agreed that they are not going to act retrogressively.
Professor, can you correct this?
Yes.
Can you correct this?
Let me finish. I will give you
No, I want you to correct.
Yes.
That the British are not conceding the guilt, the atrocities of Mau Mau. It is we, Kenyans, who have hired lawyers to go and seek redemption.
It wasn't an act of benevolence.
Wait. Let me finish my point. But you see now, if you look at the way Africa is operating now, there are too many problems that we are not sorting out correctly. We have corruption going on. You have been to very many countries in Africa. I've been to Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria. The same story you find in Kenya is here. We can't fix our football teams. We can't fix corruption. We can't fix what you call fair and a good election. It's questionable because we can't. Many African countries cannot conduct their election. In Sudan, the guy called Bashir, who is one of the fellows who would speak loudest about this ICC, is organizing an election which he has already won. Now, this is what Kabando
says. Broad and sweeping statements.
No.
He has organized an election which he has already won.
Okay.
Am I saying
I want to come to you, Harun, but with a question.
Right.
I want to play a clip for you, and then we'll talk after that. Listen to Yoweri Museveni, who is Uganda's president, and what he had to say during the Jamhuri Day celebrations in December 2014. As you know very very well. He is one of the African leaders that has been speaking loudly against the ICC. Listen, then we'll talk.
Mimi nitaleta motion kwa African Union kikao chijao. Nataka sisi wote tutoke kwenye koti hiyo ya wazungu wakae na koti yao.
Okay, so clearly an issue about leaving the Wazungus their own court, which I think answers what Kabando was talking about, of whether there's a problem between Africa and the West. But let me put it to you this way. Dominic Ongwen, who is a Uganda national, is due to stand trial at the International Criminal Court. Uganda's president said nothing of him, even though at that point he had not yet been handed over to the ICC. Uganda itself has even forwarded cases to the ICC. What do you make of the double speak? Does this court just work for African leaders when it's their enemies who are there, and doesn't work for them if it's their friends who are there?
And you have summarized the answer in the form of a question. Exactly. Because what has happened is this. First, I think I need to make the point clear that the African Union is not a member of the ICC. Each state party is a member of the ICC in its own individual capacity. The African Union became a forum of discussing the ICC question when Kenya politicized the issues related to President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy William Ruto. Nothing less, nothing more. The fact that Museveni talked like he did, they haven't. The African Union, by the way, has not talked about Laurent Gbagbo, who is in the ICC. They haven't talked about Charles Taylor, who was not convicted by the ICC but an international tribunal based at The Hague. The only reason this campaign is so strong is Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, Kenya. Because even before Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto were presented to the ICC by the ICC's chief prosecutor, already Omar Bashir was a subject and has already been a fugitive from the ICC. To date, he is just a byline, a footnote in the conversation around the ICC. So the African Union is being used to discuss, to try to legalize a political question, a political contest, a political conversation around whether it is the ICC is good for Africa or not. And I think that we are wrong in terms of, and the leadership our leadership is wrong in framing the question wrongly, because it goes back to what I asked. What is the mischief? What is wrong with the ICC that we are seeking to deal with by creating what they are thinking is an alternative? But I'm saying that even in the principle of complementarity, and I seek your indulgence to discuss that in terms of, because it's kind of a technical question.
Briefly, please.
Very well. That the principle of complementarity, even if you established that the African court, it would still be subjected to the principle of complementarity that if it doesn't answer to the critical question of dealing with impunity, then anyway, any president will be taken to the ICC at any cost. And lastly, I wanted to, you may disagree, you will.
On one point.
Yes. Lastly, what I wanted to say is something that Kabando talked about earlier, and my brother referred to it, about the US not being part of the ICC. I think this thing of self-humiliation, that it can't be good for us if it's not good for the US, is precisely the self-defeatist or lack of self-esteem I'm talking about, where we think that if the Mzungus don't do it this way, then it can't be good for us. Kenya has led the world in the M-Pesa technology.
Very good.
How come we cannot lead the world in doing justice for our people?
And you see, this is a contradiction we have been talking about. We are leading in technology, in academia, in sports, in innovation, in research. I think. Oh, and let me finish. Yeah. I think to start discussing or to continue the discussion as to whether the case against the president had merit or did not have merit does not help anybody. The fact is, the ICC prosecutor submitted and considered that she did not have evidence. After all those years, they did not have evidence, meaning the investigations were very shoddy. They were not, let me finish, unless you speak for ICC. They were shielded. Let me finish my point. That the fact that the case of the president has gone down without any prosecution evidence being availed. Which court is this, Anne? That after you are acquitted, then there's availed documentation on material, rumor, that cannot be substantiated. Which court in the world will subject somebody who has already been acquitted of any crime?
Don't open that.
No.
A trial in the court of public opinion.
Yes. Secondly, yes. The esteem that we are talking about is that pride that if we know and we are sufficiently informed by our own consciousness that we can prosecute a matter to convince the world to protect our own, then that's justified. Number 3, and finally, if we are saying that this whole campaign against ICC and for establishment of an African court is because of the case of Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, and all these 54 presidents of sovereign nations of Africa, fully independent, are convinced and are seduced by the Kenyan intellectual campaign to form a consensus and go one way, then it means that indeed our leadership is capable, and if we can lead Africa, then we are leading well.
All right, gentlemen, I must prevail on you now. My director tells me we are absolutely out of time. I want to come to you all very quickly with a 30-second response to this question. Can anything good come out of this hopefully expanded Africa Court of Justice? Haru, 30 seconds.
Yeah, there is going to be something good. At least there is a forum for dealing with other issues except for the impunity at the highest level. But I wanted to say that the ECOWAS itself requested the ICC to intervene in the case of Mali, and that answers my brother what he's talking about.
All right.
Now, for me, Anne, I just beg the director to give me 3 more seconds out of that. But the point is this. The agenda for ICC is twofold. One, there are Christian traditional leaders in Africa who are annoyed with the West because the West tells them that you are committing crimes and you promote impunity. That group is there pursuing their agenda so that impunity continues. But there is also the other hidden agenda which is represented by the likes of Bashir. That's why I said I differed with him. The hardline Islamists are pursuing the agenda. Even they say they support President Uhuru Kenyatta's point, or Museveni's, but theirs is to promote anti-Westernism on the continent, so that governments of Africa, like most of the hardline Islamic governments, promote impunity and they are not questioned. So unless we explore that agenda, that is the agenda that is dancing on the floor of the of the OAU, the AU in Addis Ababa.
But can anything good come out of an expanded Africa Court of Justice? Yes or no?
No.
All right, Kabando?
I don't condemn ICC wholesale. It was a deterrent in the last elections. I want to agree that the fact that people knew there was ICC, people behaved. And people accepted to be defeated after the Supreme Court made a ruling, and those that won also behaved themselves in terms of what was communicated. We need to appreciate that the question mark that is the Africa map with Madagascar as a dot down there can be sufficiently answered through democratic process, respecting our democratic institutions, the judiciary, Parliament, which are popularly elected by the people to uphold our constitution. Something good is going to come, as of the way it cannot be stopped.
Gentlemen, I'll host you again. I promise I will. Thank you so much for your views. That was Opinion Court, and we'll get your feedback soon. But time for us to take a break. We're back with more after these messages.